Well, howdy folks, and welcome back to Pecan Ranch. Today I want to expound a little bit on the benefits of rotational grazing, as well as I want to answer the questions involving pigs. Like, how can they be good for my pasture? How can they be good for my soil quality? And what are the benefits of pasture raising pigs from the perspective of the pasture? There's many benefits involving pasture raising pigs in the quality of the meat and the and just the overall happiness of the animal and the quality of life for the animal. But we're going to focus today specifically on the soil, the pasture growth, things along that lines. So we'll go ahead and we will talk briefly about that, and I will explain the benefits of pasture raising pigs, what it can do to your pastures, what it can do to your quality of your soil, and also how you can use them as a land management tool. We'll see you folks here in a bit. Okay folks, so as I've mentioned before in a previous video where I kind of gave an overview of rotational grazing, I am a huge proponent of rotational grazing. I'm a huge believer in grazing in a rotational pattern. It opens up the possibilities of controlling more variables and being able to manage your land in a more controlled scenario versus just open grazing, continuous grazing on one big giant pasture. So I'm going to give real quick just kind of a brief review of that. Benefit of rotational grazing is you are selective. So what is rotational grazing, I guess, would be a better question to answer real quick. And that would be, for instance, out here I have about 7 acres of the back pasture that I could do one continuous grazing, but continual grazing doesn't allow me to control each specific area that I want to apply specific amounts of pressure to. So with rotational grazing, I've broken them up into paddocks. Now I'm using a temporary mobile fence setup that allows me to leapfrog my way around and set up my individual paddocks, and I can customize those paddocks as I see fit. I can adjust them size-wise if I need to. So that's a benefit if you're doing temporary fencing and rotational grazing, where you can adjust your paddock size, move it as you need to be. Say you don't have as many pigs this go round, or you have more pigs this go round, and you need to increase your paddock size. So instead of doing 1 acre paddocks, you do 1.5 acre paddocks, so on and so forth. So what we do is we start them off in a training pen, then we allow them to graze the front pasture, then we move them to paddock 1, which was where they had been, and then we move them to paddock 2, and then today I'm going to be setting up paddock 3, and we'll be moving them today. This paddock is about done. This is what I want my pastures to basically effectively look like, to ensure that I've got good soil disturbance before moving them on. So the practice of rotational grazing allows you to more control where your animals are applying pressure and for how long they're doing it. Then you can move them on to the next pasture, allowing time for the last place that they were on to rest. The rotational grazing practice is good for really any grazing animals, not necessarily just pigs, not just cows, not just goats, whatever you want. If you apply a rotational grazing practice to any of your grazing animals, you will see benefits in your farm. That is a guarantee. It's a little bit more work. It's not just set it and forget it, let them do their thing, but you can not only see benefits in your pasture qualities, more specific management that you can apply, but also it will increase your potential stock rate. Now, in my particular instance, I could continually graze them. I don't have too many animals for my specific amount of land. I have plenty enough land to continually graze them, but I need to apply specific pressure. So, but if you want to, you can increase your stock rate because you're able to more carefully control your grazing. So if you have cattle, instead of letting them graze all the way to the ground, if they're continually grazing, you can say, okay, we've got it, we're keeping that pasture height at that grass height at that perfect nutritional value level. We graze them down, we move them to the next paddock, and then that allows those pasture grasses to always maintain that optimal nutritional area, which means if there's more nutrition in your pasture and more feed available for them to graze on, that means you can add more head of cattle per acre if you rotational graze. Now, and I've got a few pictures I'll throw up here, but to kind of give a reference point of this is their previous pasture, and it's just now springtime, so things are just starting to get green. But as you can see, after this pasture has had about 3 weeks, close to a month or so of rest, it is starting to turn very green. In stark reference to where they're just finishing up, they have tilled this place up, they have done what they need to do. And then the next paddock where they haven't been to is a little bit different. It's untouched, it's untilled, the pigs haven't rooted through it, but notice as I throw up this picture here, there is no, we don't have the green pasture grasses sprouting up yet. And the reason for that is because in here, the pigs have gone in, they've tilled everything up, they fertilized everything. Pigs poop a lot. That's just a matter of fact. And they've gone through here and done a phenomenal job of spreading fertilizer, tilling everything up. And to be honest with you, when I first got this piece of land, this was briars. This whole pasture was briars. It was just weeds and thickets and thorns and nastiness. And now we've got some beautiful looking grasses just sprouting up right here, unhindered by thorns and thistles and stuff. Now, this may be anecdotal evidence, but I have noticed that I have very few thorns sprouting up in here after the pigs spent a little over a month in here. And I don't know if it's because they tilled everything up and tore them out of the ground or if they ate them. I haven't actually watched them. I have seen them eating on vines and stuff. I have not seen them eating the thorns. I know goats will eat that stuff, but I have not actually witnessed it with my eyes. Correct me in the comments section below if you know whether or not pigs will eat things like that. I do know from seeing it here that we don't have that anymore. They have taken them basically virtually have removed all of those thorns and briars and stuff. So that's where pigs can be beneficial versus just, you know, grazing an animal, especially if you have horses. If you have horses, grazing them, you know, obviously if you have horses, you're gonna have to graze them, but they're not necessarily the best of land management tools because they're kind of picky eaters. Cattle will eat more than what horses will do. Goats will eat just everything. They'll do a good job of getting rid of the undesirables that you don't want in your property. Pigs are somewhere, honestly, between cattle and goats. There's some things that they will not necessarily eat that goats will, and also on top of that, pigs tend to graze down. And when I say that, I mean their life kind of exists, you know, below the knees. They're always looking down. So a benefit of having goats is they'll graze up. They'll look up and they'll take out vines and stuff up higher than pigs will. So if you have anything that's kind of growing up on your trees that's up taller, the pigs will ignore that because to them it doesn't exist in their life. So, but I want to talk specifically about pigs. Why pigs? Well, their level of soil disturbance is unmatched by any other livestock out there. They come in with their noses like little shovels and they just root around. and they're able to disturb that soil, till it up, take what could be hard, compact soil, turn it into nice, fluffy, perfect fertile ground for some good pasture grasses to come up. Plus they get into a latent seed bank that may be resting deep underneath the soil of good, nice green pasture grasses that are just waiting to have an opportunity to sprout. Another benefit to using them, and you can utilize goats in this instance as well, is this was a pretty thick forested area, and pigs love wooded areas. They love to root around in wooded areas, and they have done a phenomenal job of clearing this out. I honestly wish I would have gotten a before picture, but I could not have been walking where I'm walking now to walk through here. And they've taken what was real thick that I wasn't sure if I could reclaim this as pasture land, and they have basically decimated all of the undergrowth in here and cleaned it up for me. So now it's my turn to come in here, and I'm going to thin this out a little bit, take out a lot of these smaller trees, leave the mature wooded trees, and we'll regain some more grazable land that otherwise we wouldn't really be able to graze cattle through here. There wasn't much for them to graze on. I take out some of these smaller trees, thin it out, and this will develop into some pretty nice pasture land. So pigs can be used in conjunction. They can be used as a preparatory tool for your pickier eaters. If you graze them ahead of some of your animals, like your cattle and such, then you can potentially transform that pasture where something that only pigs would eat on or goats would eat on into something that horses will graze on. For instance, again, in this area you wouldn't have been able to graze horses, but now that they've come through, cleared out a lot of this undergrowth, tilled up the soil, this is going to be nice fertile soil. I'm going to come in, I'm going to take out a lot of these smaller trees, leave the mature ones, and we'll have basically kind of a shaded, partially wooded pasture that would even the snobbiest of horses wouldn't turn their nose up to. And looking at all of the different animals that we could utilize to transform this pasture, pigs really just fit the bill the best, knowing that they're going to be the ones that can apply the most pressure to the soil that I needed them to, that otherwise would have taken much longer with goats or cattle. I mean, even cattle can be beneficial. They are going to spread fertilizer, they are going to graze, keep your pasture grazed at the length that you want it to. But the pigs, we knew were going to be basically our little earth movers, and that's what they're doing, and that's what they're doing a phenomenal job of. I mean, this is just absolutely beautiful, and give it a couple months and this will be the most luscious pasture that more luscious than this pasture has ever been in probably decades. So what do I mean by selective pressure whenever it comes to rotational grazing? When it comes to rotational grazing, you can select the amount of pressure that you want on a specific area. For instance, the last paddock that they were in, they were there for over a month. It was more like a month and a half. This one is going to be just under a month, because there was less for them to graze on, so they were able to make quick work of this place basically. And there's far less wooded area. That other area over there, that other paddock over there, they had about half an acre-ish of wooded area with a bunch of oak trees in there and a bunch of acorns, so they had a bunch to munch on. This particular paddock doesn't have a lot of woods, and coming out of winter, it's not like there was a lot of grasses for them to graze on, and there really aren't any acorns or pecans and stuff for them to munch on either, because there's not as much wooded area. It's mostly open pasture on this particular paddock. So because of that, I'm being selective of how much pressure they're applying here. It'll be less time, so we're moving them sooner than we did over there. And this next one is way more wood, so they'll probably reside there a whole lot longer before moving on to the next one. So it allows me to place specific pressure on specific areas. If I just let them continuously graze this whole thing, they would spend very little time in these open fields, and they would spend most of their time in the woods where they really like to be. And especially this time of year where there isn't a ton of grass to graze on, they're mostly munching on acorns, pecans, nuts, roots, things of that nature. And so I wanted them to be able to be in the pasture to do this right here. Get in here and till up the ground, and with their little shovel noses, hey, what are you doing, piggy? Hey, I know. Oh, you want the hugs and the sweetness. Okay, let's see how she's getting in there, and she's got that little nose that's just able to really till up the ground in there and turn this, what once was really, honestly, relatively hard packed clay, and turn it into a nice, fluffy, soft, tilled up soil, and they honestly wouldn't spend that much time in these open pastures if I gave them full access to this whole back pasture where they could spend most of their time in the woods. And so that's why I've kind of designed and laid out my specific pastures or paddocks to not to where it could kind of force them into spending more time in the open pastures to recoup this stuff and turn it into nice grazable land. And otherwise, I mean, I could set out paddocks that are specifically just woods, and they'd be happy as a clam. But I've kind of sectioned it off to where it's partially woods, partially pasture, so that way they aren't focusing too much into those woods. And to be honest with you, I've got enough woods out here. If I'd let them continually graze, they probably wouldn't touch any of this. They'd spend the entire grow out period till they go to market in the woods, because they would have enough to do so. But breaking it up allows me to set specific pressure on specific areas. So the pigs are coming in here, they're tilling everything up, they're fertilizing it, and they're kind of, so you may be wondering to yourself, are pigs going to be right for my pasture? Don't they tear up land? Do they tear up the land? Well, sort of. Here's the thing. Yes, they root up, and they've basically they're like if I took a big giant tiller through here and I just ran a tiller all through here. It isn't specifically torn up as much as it's tilled up. Now, you may ask, well, I've heard that pigs are bad for the land in reference to wild pigs. So why would wild pigs not be good for a farmer, but domestic pigs, pasture raised, are good for a farmer? Well, the question, or the answer is really, the evidence I have is relatively anecdotal, and it's not 100% scientific based. I haven't run any specific studies on this or anything, but I will say this. Wild pigs, they move around in sounders, which is, a herd of pigs. And these sounders vary in size. They could be 14 pigs, a dozen pigs, 24 pigs, 5 pigs. But they just roam around willy-nilly, okay? So because you can't control them, they may come in and they may target hard a specific area and really tear into a specific spot and leave the rest of your pasture untouched. And then you're left with a crater in your pasture. Your domestic pigs, not only do they not do that as much, but because you can control them with rotational grazing, you're going to get a nice even tillage of your land versus a wild pig that doesn't want to spend too much time in a specific area because they're wild. They have the instincts of trying to, hide from predators. They're not fans of people. They want to hide from people. And so they're kind of like a strike team. They just want to get in and get out. So they get in, come in at night, and they just tear up a specific spot, and then they leave. And they may come back, but they're not likely going to do it's not going to result the same here. And in fact, the pasture where my cows are in, or my cattle are in, my cow and her bull calf, the pasture there, my neighbor's pasture, has fallen victim to wild pigs. And I'll show you here in a second a picture of that. So as you can in this photo, the particular pressure that was applied in this pasture, and this has occurred over time. It has happened over months, and has actually decreased since putting cattle in there, because the pigs have not, I guess, haven't been a fan of hanging around the cattle. But you can see in here, in this photo, that there's just a big crater torn out, and that was done by pigs. That wasn't a tractor, that wasn't a machine. Pigs came in and tore this place up and then left. And the difference is, if you look here, is that my pigs have been here and they didn't focus hard on one spot and tear a crater in. They have evenly tilled the land, versus the wild pigs that come in, target a spot, hit it hard, and get out of there. And then they may or may not ever come back, and then they may target another spot. So that's why you have that notion that wild pigs aren't necessarily great for land management. You don't want them around. But then, and it almost sounds contradictory when you hear people saying, well, pasture raising pigs is great for land management. When I first heard that, because I had grown up all my life thinking, you know, wild pigs, not good for the land. We don't want them around. They tear things up. They make a mess. And when I first moved out here and started brush hogging this place and discovering wild pigs out here that had, you know, come in and out, my first thought was, got to get rid of the pigs. I don't want any pigs ever on my property. Fast forward to today, and here I am with a bunch of pigs on my property. It's just different. The best analogy I can think of is, imagine if you had a bulldozer, but it had a mind of its own, and it was, you know, just a computer-controlled bulldozer that just went and did whatever it wanted to do. Well, that would have the potential for causing destruction on your property. Now, if you have a bulldozer and you own said bulldozer and you can drive said bulldozer, now you can control the bulldozer to do what you want it to do, and that can improve your land. So that's kind of the best way that I could think to explain the difference between wild pigs and domestic pigs, and why wild pigs are not necessarily good for your property versus domestic pigs that are good for your property and can have a great impact and could be utilized as a phenomenal tool to manage your property. Not to mention all the other benefits of pasture raising them versus confinement raising, and the quality of life, the quality of meat, and that nature. My pigs are happy pigs. I mean, they're super happy pigs. As you can see, they love me. They want to be around me. They're having the time of their lives out here. They are far happier out here than when they were in their training pen. They were fine in their training pen, but whenever I first opened them up to pasture, they didn't know what to do with themselves. They just thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and they've been having fun ever since. In fact, so much so that I've got this shelter way over yonder that you folks have seen before. I've shown it to you, that I built for them, that they have not been sleeping in for the past week, because they found themselves a nice little hidey hole up here in this cedar tree up on this high ground, and they've decided that that's a much cooler place to hang out, and they like it. Even in the rain, they were in here. It was raining overnight, and I came out in the morning, and this is where they were sleeping, not underneath the dry, comfortable tarp that I had set up. They like it better over here. So they're having just a grand old time out here, being pasture raised. So, you know, though this video isn't specifically about the benefit of the pigs, thought I'd throw a little bit of that information in there. The benefit to the pigs is great. The benefit to your pasture is really great as well. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about what to graze on your land. Keep that in mind if you're thinking how you want to improve your pasture quality, how you want to take more hold of your pasture, your land management, and how you're intending on you know, having a nice renewable resource with your land. Because, you know, people think of it as a linear thing. Like, this is grass, the grass grows, the animals graze the grass, and that's it. But it's not. It's a cyclical thing. It's a cycle. And you can't keep taking from the earth, from the soil, without replacing it, without replacing something. Because if you keep drawing the resource out, eventually you won't have that resource anymore. And so there has to be something in return. And pigs are a phenomenal way of incorporating that return into your pasture, so that way you can return nutrients into your soil. You can till up, get to that latent seed bank, and really see your pasture flourish and turn into something that it's never been before, especially when coupled with rotational grazing. I cannot mention enough how important rotational grazing is to land management. You really need to consider, if you're not currently rotational grazing, you really need to consider adopting a rotational grazing pattern, and you'll see the benefits almost immediately. And I mean, I'm not kidding whenever I say almost immediately. Once you move your livestock off of one paddock into the next, it will be a matter of weeks before the paddock that they were on that recovers, that it's starting to look really good. By the time you rotate around back to that one full rotation into your paddock design, by then you will see major changes in the quality that your pasture has versus constant pressure on that pasture. So those are my thoughts on rotational grazing, and on what you know, how the pigs can be extremely beneficial, and why pigs. Why is it the pigs specifically, and how are they better than wild pigs? And I hope that I explained that well enough for you. If anyone has anything to add, you think I'm wrong on something, drop that in the comment section below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. And if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you have not already subscribed. Hit the notification bell so that way you don't miss any videos. Please go ahead and just subscribe. It costs you nothing. It's free. It's free. You go ahead and just click that subscribe button if you're watching this video. And if you don't like me after a while, you can always hit unsubscribe. There's no contract. You can just unsubscribe. Just go ahead for now, hit that subscribe button. And until the next time, we'll see you all back at the ranch.